the first 100 days.
And I think what you're seeing is just sort of a regrowth of optimism.
My interview with President Trump's budget director, Mick Mulvaney, about his work in the White House and how he lives his Catholic faith. Pressure on North Korea. The Trump administration lays out its plan to senators at the White House. We get reaction. Preparing for the Pope. Catholics in Egypt eagerly await the Holy Father. And defunding Planned Parenthood. Pro-life students make their presence known at the U.S. Capitol using powerful imagery. On EWTN News Nightly for Thursday, April 27, 2017. Good evening from Washington, D.C., and thank you to those of you joining us from around the world for news from a Catholic perspective. I'm Lauren Ashburn. A senior Navy commander says the North Korea crisis is at the worst point he's ever seen. Admiral Harry Harris oversees military operations in the Pacific. His assessment came during testimony before a Senate panel today. Capitol Hill correspondent Jason Calvi joins us. Good evening, Jason.
Lauren, Admiral Harris says he has no doubt North Korea intends to obtain a nuclear-tipped missile capable of striking the United States. The U.S. is unsure how far along North Korea is in their nuclear and missile programs. Harris says it's not a matter of if, but when.
All nations need to take this threat seriously because North Korea's missiles point in all directions.
Admiral Harry Harris, a Navy commander, tells the Senate Armed Services Committee the crisis with North Korea is real.
Kim Jong-un is making progress on his quest for nuclear weapons and a means to deliver them intercontinentally.
As North Korea shows off its own military might, the U.S. is sending a massive amount of American weaponry to the region. The United States says the drills are routine, but some lawmakers are on edge.
It is a slow-motion Cuban Missile Crisis in its very beginnings.
That may have prompted an invitation for all senators to the White House yesterday for a classified briefing.
North Korea is the most dangerous spot on the planet right now.
The reclusive communist nation gets help from China, its main trading partner and economic lifeline.
North Korea's economy would barely exist without China, so it has vast economic sway that so far has not been applied.
A group of American warships is now within striking range of North Korea.
We're not out to invade North Korea. All this military action is designed to deter them from being able to hit us.
It's important to add that U.S. officials say a preemptive strike is not likely. The Trump administration says it wants to put a burst of economic and diplomatic pressure on North Korea. Lauren?
Jason, have earlier economic sanctions against North Korea helped?
The Pacific commander told the Senate today that the sanctions imposed by the U.S. and other countries have not slowed North Korea's quest for weapons of mass destruction. Secretary of State Rex Tillerson is chairing a UN Security Council meeting tomorrow to discuss current and new sanctions.
Correspondent Jason Calvi on Capitol Hill. Thank you, Jason. President Trump says the U.S. won't be pulling out of the North American Free Trade Agreement, known as NAFTA. It comes hours after administration officials said the president was considering a draft executive order to withdraw from the deal. The president sent a tweet this morning saying, "I received calls from the president of Mexico and the prime minister of Canada asking to renegotiate NAFTA rather than terminate. I agreed, subject to the fact that if we do not reach a fair deal for all, we will then terminate NAFTA. Relationships are good. Deal very possible." Joining us now is White House Office of Management and Budget Director Mick Mulvaney. Welcome to the program.
Hello, Lauren. Thanks for having me.
We are just 2 days away from President Trump's 100th day in office. In your view, what are his biggest accomplishments? What have been the biggest challenges?
Accomplishments. Every time I get that question a lot, I've been trying to sort of go over in my head, should I pick out regulatory reform first? Should I pick out, trade? Should I pick out Justice Gorsuch? And really what I keep settling on is optimism. the consumer confidence is high, business confidence is high, the stock markets, which are sort of bellwethers of whether people think the country's going in the right direction, is up. And I think what you're seeing is just sort of a regrowth of optimism about the way the country is headed. Even if folks who don't like the president, maybe didn't vote for him, still think, you know what, maybe some of his policies make sense and maybe things are going to be better in the next couple of years. And I think that's a tremendous accomplishment for any president in the first 100 days.
Well, yesterday the White House unveiled a very ambitious tax reform plan and massive tax cuts. There are critics who say America is drowning in debt. Tax cuts are going to make it soar even higher. How is this administration going to keep the huge cuts from ballooning the federal deficit?
A couple different answers for that. First of all, as we actually get closer to a final proposal, we'll start looking at the impacts of economic growth. One of the things we wanted to do with the proposals we rolled out yesterday is get America growing again. If you're 30 years old, you've probably never had a job in your adult lifetime in a growing American economy. The economy has grown at less than 2% for the last 10 years. When I was a young man, 3% growth was fairly ordinary. That doesn't sound like that big of a difference, but it really is. If I was a young man, if you got laid off, it was easy to find another job. If you wanted to quit your job, you could start another business. That's what 3% growth does in an economy of this size, and that's what we're trying to get back to. And when you do that, government takes in more money. But regarding the specifics where we are right now, we've not, on purpose, we've not gone into too much specifics. Not because we're trying to hide any numbers, just because what we did yesterday was an invitation to start the discussions with the House and the Senate. We didn't want to pre-cook a bill. We didn't want to be perceived as forcing something down their throats. We said, look, here's the principles, here's the guidelines, here's the numbers we want to talk about. Let's start the discussion with the Hill.
You are Catholic. And you've talked about your meeting with Pope Francis when he challenged American lawmakers to protect persecuted Christians. I was just in Iraq. I returned. I know it greatly impacted you. It greatly impacted me. And President Trump told us, EWTN News Nightly today, that he is committed to helping Christians. So I'm curious for you, do you believe that there will be an aid package for persecuted Christians? How important is it?
I don't know what our assistance will look like, but I do know, because I know about things I can't talk about on the air, that there are steps underway right now to address this. There's meetings that have taken place, meetings that will continue to take place. This is a much bigger priority to the president. I think we talk about generally, most because we're talking about other things. But no one can look at what's happening to Christians and other religious minorities in the Middle East and not think, now wait a second, this has got to stop. Do we have the ability to impact the outcomes? And I think we do. So I'm satisfied the president is taking it absolutely seriously.
Excellent. I'm going to be testifying in front of a House committee showing my video from Iraq. You have to see it. It is just absolutely jaw-dropping. Beheadings of the Statue of Mary, bullet holes in the cross. One last question before we go. Your faith, and how does that impact your work?
I probably couldn't do it without my faith. I was here, I think, 8 or 9 consecutive Sundays working. OMB is part of the government that works all the time. We work 12, 14, 16-hour days, 7 days a week. I think I've been home 5 days in the last 70. But there's St. Matt's Cathedral is probably just a 15-minute walk from here. So having that sort of outpost, that oasis here in Washington, D.C. has been a big deal. There's also the Catholic Information Center that I like to go to during the week from time to time. It's getting harder to do as more people know who I am. It's, I like to go and quietly sit in the back, but it's nice.
And then it's Mick, right?
Yeah, Mr. Mulvaney, it's interesting to do the Sunday morning talk shows and then get dropped off at the cathedral and have people see you in the same suit, but that's fine.
Right, that's all right. You know, I was talking to Sean Spicer, press secretary, and he said the same thing, exactly the same thing. It comes off the Sunday shows, goes to Mass.
Yeah. In fact, I hope I have time to tell a quick story. He was telling me that he was at Mass shortly after he got here, and nobody knew who he was until they came time to give the sign of peace, and everybody around him said, "Oh, you're Sean Spicer. You're Sean Spicer." So, like the next week, I'm at Mass at the cathedral. I think it was a Saturday 5:30 Mass, and during the sign of peace, I turn around and Sean Spicer sitting right behind me at Mass.
And you say, "Oh, you're Sean Spicer."
Yeah, that was fun.
That's great. Fabulous. Well, I hope this is one of many conversations that we can have. I'd love to show you this video. Thank you so much for joining us, OMB Director Mick Mulvaney.
Thanks, Laura.
We are going to take a closer look at the impact of President Trump. Coming up, the Hill's Bob Cusack and Washington Examiner's Tim Carney are both in our green room with red chairs. They're getting ready to join me in studio. But first, Representative Chris Smith, a Republican from New Jersey, and Representative Karen Bass, a Democrat from California, unveil a bill to fight human trafficking. It would reauthorize $130 million for prevention and victim protection. The bill is named after Frederick Douglass, the famous American abolitionist. We spoke to his great-great-great-grandson.
If we can reduce the vulnerability of young people to becoming trafficked, we're also reducing the vulnerability of young people to becoming traffickers, and we're reducing the vulnerability of young people to being consumers of goods and services that are produced by trafficked people.
The bill would also provide training to spot victims of human trafficking. Pope Francis is making a request ahead of his trip to Egypt. The Holy Father says in a tweet, "Please pray for my journey tomorrow as a pilgrim of peace to Egypt." He'll arrive in the North African country tomorrow and stay until Saturday. Catholics in Egypt look forward to the Pope's visit and the message it sends to Christians in the region.
We're very happy that the Pope is coming to visit Egypt. It's a message of love and peace from him. And he's trying to prove to the world that Egypt is still safe, no matter what terrorism is trying to do in our country.
Security is heightened for the Holy Father's trip since ISIS has been attacking Christians in the country. Pope Francis plans to meet with the head of the Coptic Orthodox Church, Muslim leaders, and the Egyptian president. He'll also celebrate Mass outside of Cairo. Edward Penton, Rome correspondent for EWTN's National Catholic Register, joins us. And Ed, you're traveling with the Holy Father this weekend on the papal plane, is that right?
That's right, yes, we leave early tomorrow morning.
Well, the National Geographic calls Arab Christians, including Copts, the forgotten faithful. Can you give us a snapshot of the Christian community in Egypt that the Pope will be visiting?
Yes, well, the Copts are one of the oldest Christian communities in the world. They date right back to the first decades after the Christ's life, and so there's a long legacy of Copts in the church, and they actually were the first to start the monastic tradition in the church, and also the first to create a catechetical institute. So they have a great history, a great legacy. There are about 8 to 10 million Copts in Egypt, and they are mostly Coptic Orthodox, but there are also 272,000 Coptic Catholics as well. So they make up about, I think, 10 or 20% of the population, but who are mostly Muslim, of course.
The U.S. Commission on International Religious Freedom just released its new report yesterday, and despite recent attacks on Christians and ISIS, it's saying that they'll target them. The report also says that Egypt has improved over the past year. What has changed?
Well, it's mainly down to the President El-Sisi, who is actually quite strong against Islamic extremism. He's condemned the recent attacks on Palm Sunday against the Coptics, 2 Coptic churches. He's also called for reform of Islam, even at the heart of the center of Islam, which is the center of Islamic learning, the Sunni part of Islam, and called for reform there, which went down quite well among certain people. And then he's also been very strong on clamping down and bringing to justice those who perpetrated attacks. So there's quite a lot of hope there with this new president among the Christians, but there is still a long way to go, and there's still restrictions on religious freedom in many areas, particularly in the workplace, where there's some discrimination.
All right, well, good luck on your trip with the Pope this weekend. Edward Penton, Rome correspondent for EWTN's National Catholic Register. Thanks, Ed.
Thanks, Lauren.
Pope Francis thanks the Papal Foundation for the spiritual and material help they provide the Church, especially in developing countries.
Di pregare per le necessità dei poveri.
The Holy Father encouraging the group to pray for the needs of the poor, the conversion of hearts, and the spread of the gospel. Cardinal Donald Wuerl, Archbishop of Washington, D.C. here, greeted the pontiff on behalf of the foundation, which is in Rome, on their annual pilgrimage. It began in the United States in 1988 to support the mission of the Holy Father. The fund has grown to more than $215 million, with $120 million awarded in grants and scholarships. Coming up, a key meeting at the White House. The president of Argentina pays a visit. What's top of the agenda? and undercover video.
Well, why don't you start by telling me where you used to pay?
A new expose on the sale of baby body parts. President Trump welcomes Argentine President Mauricio Macri to the White House. A red carpet and military honor guard awaited Macri as his motorcade pulled up the driveway to the south lawn entrance of the White House. The two met in the Oval Office and sat down with their delegations for a working lunch. One subject brought up today, lemons.
I'll tell him about North Korea and he'll tell me about lemons. But I think we're going to be very favorably disposed.
The Trump administration recently postponed a decision by former President Obama to lift a 16-year ban on imports of Argentine lemons. This follows a World Trade Organization dispute. Joining us now is Alejandro Bermudez, Executive Director of Así Prensa, the largest Latin American Catholic news agency and part of the EWTN family. Welcome to the program, Alejandro.
Thank you for having me, Lauren.
Trade was on the White House agenda today. They announced last night that the U.S. is not going to leave NAFTA. We consistently run a trade surplus with Argentina, and President Mauricio Macri is here. What do you think Argentina wants in a trade deal with the U.S.?
Well, Argentina wants what everybody wants, which is some kind of advantage in the trade deal with a nation which is the richest in the world. In this case, in the case of Macri, his own political survival, and in many aspects, because Argentina is coming from a very deep crisis that involves its relationship with the United States as part of it.
What issues are important to Catholics in Argentina? You were raised there.
The nation has been extremely divided by the former administration, and Macri is seen as a possibility to bring the nation again together. So for Catholics, the expectation of a united country around one leader is among the top of the priorities right now.
Alejandro Bermudez, thank you so much. Executive Director of Así Prensa and an EWTN family member. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Lauren, for having me.
We're getting our first look at another undercover video from the Center for Medical Progress. It allegedly captures a Planned Parenthood official haggling over baby parts again.
And so what we, sorry, what? What we've been quoting is $50 per specimen. I think some people are doing more, some slightly less.
50 was like 12 years ago.
Dr. Mary Gatter appears to be talking about the industry average sale price. Gatter was also caught on camera in 2015 talking about selling organs so she could buy a Lamborghini. Pro-life activist David DeLeiden says the Justice Department should prosecute Planned Parenthood to the full extent of the law, and taxpayers must stop being forced to subsidize Planned Parenthood's criminal abortion empire. Students for Life of America sock it to Planned Parenthood at the Capitol. Almost 200,000 tiny baby socks were piled up on Capitol Hill yesterday as a part of the group's Sock It to PP campaign. It aims to collect more than 323,000 socks. Why that number, you ask? It represents one for every abortion Planned Parenthood performed last year. Students for Life wants to send a message to lawmakers.
We want Congress to see the price of their inaction. We elected this pro-life Congress and with a very clear pledge of defunding Planned Parenthood, but they have failed to do that. And we understand that there's leadership challenges and all kinds of things going on, but the pro-life generation doesn't care. We just want to get it done.
The socks were donated by pro-lifers from across the country. Up next, reaction to President Trump's key policy proposals. Bob Cusack from The Hill and Tim Carney from The Washington Examiner will join me in studio. And the White House press secretary answers unusual questions from children. Pope Francis says being a Christian is not a social status.
Le conseguenze del testimone di obbedienza sono le persecuzioni.
During his daily homily, the Holy Father says being obedient to God, like Jesus was, will lead to persecution, but the Holy Spirit will help us if we ask God for grace. Saturday marks President Trump's 100th day in office. Joining us now, Bob Cusack, editor-in-chief of The Hill, and Tim Carney, commentary editor at The Washington Examiner. Gentlemen, 100 days, 98, 100 counting. Bob, we know governing is a lot harder than running for president. I think a lot of people might not realize that. But since taking office, President Trump has been softening his position on some issues. He was very vocal about on the campaign trail, like NAFTA, which we saw today, and notably the wall. Can we expect more of that, do you think?
I think so. I mean, he's flexible, but I do think he's going to have to get some wall funding at some point. That's very important to him. Congressional leaders on the Republican side, it's not that important to them. So it's not going to be as part of this appropriations battle, but it will be, I think, coming down the road. I think that, you know, Trump changes his positions sometimes on positions. He just wants to get a deal. I think he struggled early out of the gate, but he's learning about Washington, and I think recently it's gotten a little bit of momentum.
Tim, is this going to hurt his base if he comes off of his campaign promises a little bit?
In very small amounts, and the fact is, one of the things we learned, especially as DC-centric people who think about policy, we learned that the base out there is not really that policy-focused, and that if they see him battling the press, that when Sean Spicer goes out there for his briefings and attacks reporters every
They're
day,
like, yeah!
Yeah, and when Trump is basically engaged in war with Washington is how they see it, even if we think, wait, he just sold out to, you know, this lobby or that, they're seeing him waging war with Washington. That's what they sent him here to do. The latest poll that you just saw, Washington Post, ABC, 96% of his voters said that they would vote for him again if he came on the ballot again.
He's not losing that base. When I had a lunch with him, he said he could. He's doing a lot of stuff, and those people stay with him. Bob, a Fox News poll shows more voters, 37 to 25%, think his policies are helping the economy, not hurting it. And we heard Mick Mulvaney earlier say to me that the president has given optimism to the economy. Are President Trump's policies helping the economy?
You know, I think it's more that he talks up the economy, and President Obama sometimes would talk down the economy, worried about the liberal base saying the economy was doing well. I think Trump actually talks it up, and we've seen that effect on the stock market. Now, the stock market also did well under President Obama, but I think it's less his policies and just his mannerisms of saying, hey, we're getting there, we're improving, and if he is able to improve the economy, you know, he'll get a second term.
Tim, very interesting, and I think taxes have a lot to do with this. Tax reform plan cuts the corporate tax rate. He said it's going to be the biggest in U.S. history. It simplifies the tax code for you and me. Sounds great. It was purposely vague, Mulvaney said earlier, and they didn't release a lot of details. So they wanted to do it so they could just start the conversation. Is that a lesson learned from healthcare?
It could be. It could be that they hadn't done their homework and they came up on a 100 days deadline. But it's also true that from healthcare, what happened was you had sort of Paul Ryan and the White House craft a complex bill, and members felt like it was being shoved
down
on
their
them.
throats, yeah.
And they said, oh, well, we took your input, but the members didn't have a say in the crafting of it. And I think that's saying, look, 15% corporate tax rate, reduction of the number of individual brackets, getting rid of a lot of the loopholes, that is a framework, and then let's go from there, allows for the sort of collaborative process, which could get possibly the buy-in from all these members. On the other hand, tax reform has proven elusive, one of the hardest things to pull off.
Ever in Washington, you're right. Well, our political duo, thank you so much, Bob Cusack, editor-in-chief of The Hill, Tim Carney, commentary editor with The Washington Examiner. Today is Take Our Daughters and Sons to Work Day. This morning, children took over the White House press briefing room.
Do you watch Saturday Night Live?
Who are your parents?
Yeah, he's going after them. Press Secretary Sean Spicer invited the children of the White House press corps to be reporters for a day. He took questions ranging from, does the president plan to get a dog, which I think is a no, to a question about Saturday Night Live that you just heard. He said he's usually sleeping when that show comes on, but he sees the clips the next day. And by the way, Spicer says he doesn't know if the first family has plans to get a dog. And here we have some children who were with Donald Trump. What did you think about him, you two?
I think he was good.
He was good? Okay. These are the daughters right here, Paul Fifield, who's our director of operations. This is the daughter of Toby Campion, Adelaide, and he is our producer. Thank you. I'm so glad you came in to join us at EWTN News Nightly.
Thank you for having us.
You're welcome. We'll see you guys later. For all of us here at EWTN News Nightly, we have a full crew. To all of you around the world, I'm Lauren Ashburn. Don't forget, follow us on Facebook and Twitter. I will see you again tomorrow. Good night and God bless.